Hello there, saber fans. So you've gotten your first saber. Now what? You've done your research, hopefully, and found a saber company that you liked. You picked out a hilt that you like. You've placed your order. Maybe it's been a couple weeks, and it's finally arrived in the mail. So in today's video, I'm going to go over some of the common features that you're going to find in most LGT Saber Studio sabers. Of course, there's a lot of other saber manufacturers out there, but by far the most common that are in the price range that first-time saber users are going to have are going to be these LGT sabers. You know, there's a lot of good companies I recommend, like Fire Sabers, Crimson Dawn, Dark Wolf Sabers, Rebel Sabers. Outer Rim Saber Parts has a really huge collection of actual parts that you can interchange with these. And that's just a few. There's a lot out there in the market. But they all have kind of the same core, same kind of design, same threading. They're all compatible with each other. And every now and again, you're going to get some cores that are a little bit different. So I highly recommend you read your instructions when you get in there, play around with the saber. But pretty commonly, they're going to be fairly similar. So I'm going to go over one of the more recent iterations, as well as some things that I think you should troubleshoot. So the first thing that you should do is resist the temptation to turn it on right outside the box. I'm really guilty of this. I think probably 9 times out of 10 when I get a new saber, I turn it on right out of the box. But I highly recommend that you actually charge the saber for at least 2 hours first. And if you have a saber that you can access the battery easily, so this one unfortunately is not one of those. So I've got, you got your core in here. The battery is about right here, but this part doesn't come unscrewed. So if I wanted to take this battery out and check the battery, I would have to take the core out. And I've done that before. But most of the sabers will have a removable grip. So you've got your your switch section here, and your grip section will actually be removable. So you just kind of want to untwist that, gently pull that out. There you go. And you've got your board. There's your speaker, your switch, of course, your recharge port, your light's usually there, or for a NeoPixel, you'll have the little pixel pins. But they're all going to have similar configuration here, and there's your battery. Now, a lot of times what can happen is that the little metal parts that touch the positive and negative parts of your battery might come a little unbent. So I would just kind of get your, unscrew that, check your battery, make sure that it's touching both sides, and then go ahead and charge it. If later on down the road, which I've heard this happen a lot with, or rather, when a problem typically comes up in one of the saber groups, people will end up recommending you just, bend those back. What typically happens is you go to plug the saber in, and normally it'll say charging, and the light will blink, or sometimes it won't. The Profi saber doesn't, but most of the baselit sabers, the light will blink as it's charging. And then after a couple hours, it'll say ready, and then you can unplug it and you're good to go. But if the battery's not connected, what typically happens is you plug it in, it says charging, and then immediately it will say ready. So if that happens, take your battery out, take your core out if you have to. Just make sure those prongs are gently bent in to really touch the battery. Put your battery back in, go set it to charge, and if it then acts normally, it says charging, and then just proceeds to blink for a little bit. That should have solved the problem. If you have any other problems, I'd highly recommend reach out to the saber manufacturer that you bought it from. They'll be able to hopefully work with you and fix that. But most of the time, if you have a problem with it charging or not holding a charge or it just won't turn on, check that first, and hopefully that does it for you. Otherwise, let's jump into some of the features. So most of the time, your saber is going to be held, your blade is going to be held in place with these little retention screws. And so if you want to take the blade out for any reason, you don't have to take these screws completely out. A lot of times they're very, very tiny. So just loosen them enough to where they're no longer touching the blade, but leave them in the socket. So once you do that, ta-da, you got that out. Baselit, of course, that's going to be a hollow tube. You can see your light right there. And then when you go to put it back in, you don't have to drill this in. Even if you're doing hardcore dueling, I just recommend twisting it to where, okay, now I can feel that the screw is touching the blade, and then I'm going to do about a quarter to a half turn. And then do that on this one. So now it's touching, quarter to a half turn. And different hilts will have your screws in different places. So this one has 4 on the northwest, south, east, west configuration. Some will just have like 2 on one side. Just depends. But in any case, just touch the blade and then about a quarter to a half turn and you're good. Now most of these baselit cores will actually have very similar features. Now you might get an older core, especially if you order something on Amazon, but most of the manufacturers who I mentioned earlier that exclusively sell these, they've got a newer version, and almost always you're going to have features like the hibernation mode. So right now you see the light is not on, so if you press and hold,
power on.
So now you know the power's on. And now most of the features are going to be, you press and hold for 1 blink, does something, 2 blinks does something else, 3 blinks does something else if the saber's off. Now when you turn the saber on, which is just a single tap, and while it's on, if you do 1 blink, it'll do something, 2 blinks, and so forth. And I'll go over those. But first, I wanted to show how you put this back into hibernation mode, which saves the battery. So if I hold this for 3 blinks, the light turns off, the sabers turn off, but you'll see there that the light is still on. That means that technically it's still draining power. Now, if you just leave the saber like this, I think usually about 10 minutes, it'll go into hibernation mode by itself. But what I do is I'll have it ignited, I'll press and hold, and I'll keep holding. So even though the saber's off, I'm still going to hold, and then as soon as that light goes off, like that, I know that it's in hibernation mode. So I can put it back on my display or however I'm going to store it, and I know that the battery's going to keep for a lot longer. Again, like I said, if you just put it on there, it'll turn off into hibernation mode by itself. But so let's press and hold, turn it on.
Power on.
Now while you have it off, if you want to change the volume settings, usually these will have a high volume, low volume, and mute. So I typically keep mine at low, but if I press and hold for 1 blink, it's on mute. So now, when the saber's on, there's no sound. So I highly recommend that one's a really good one if you got other people in the house, or if you want your kids to play with these and you don't want all that loud noise. You can do that. So to change the sound back on, you want to turn it off and then 1 blink.
Volume high.
So there's your volume high. 1 blink.
Steady.
Okay, so I accidentally did it with 2 blinks. We'll get to that.
Volume low.
So volume low is pretty adequate. So that I accidentally did that for 2 blinks. So 2 blinks changes the blade effect. So steady just means that it is on. And then if I go to unstable, again 2 blinks.
Unstable.
So now it's kind of like a strobing effect. Not a huge fan of this one. It looks better on the NeoPixel because it actually flows, but for baselit, this is what it's going to look like. And then for pulse is my favorite because, as you see, it's kind of breathing. It's just kind of light and dark and light and dark. That's my favorite. So now let's get into when the saber's on. If you just tap it, that's your blaster deflect. Now, if you actually hit the saber, it does that too, but blaster deflect will be just a single tap. If you do single, that's your lockup. You see it's kind of strobing white. If you do 2 blinks, that'll actually get to your color scrolling, and it does that very slowly. So you saw that it was orange, now it's kind of getting into a purple, and then it's getting into a white. And it does this scroll very, very slowly. So if you want just a very particular color, that's what I would recommend. When you get to the color you want, like a green, just do a tap, and it stops the color scroll, and that's the color that you want. Now, if you're okay with the preset colors that it comes with, and you want to go to different colors faster, you'll just press and hold for 3. And now this gets into, it just jumps the colors instead of slowly scrolling through them. This is what I prefer. So we got a nice blue, so as soon as I got to blue, I just tap, and there we go, we're done. So I hope that was informative for you guys. I hope you enjoy your first saber. Definitely, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I typically get back pretty quick, but the Force will be with you always.